to the YouTube channel. My name is Laura. Channel is John's Journey Walk Foundation, and our walk encompasses mental health, addiction, and recovery issues. This year we're going to be having a walk on July 22nd at Bowness Park. I have a very special guest today. Her name is Amy. She has a story to tell, a very special story. And I know many people out there have people they know, families, friends, acquaintances that have been through things like this. I have been through it with my brother. That's what the walk is about, my brother, and anyone else that is no longer here with us or is struggling and in the process of improving and going on their journey of recovery from either mental health or addictions. So Amy is going to tell a little bit about herself, and we'll ask a few questions, and she can let you know what it's like from her perspective as a recovering. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that I'm here, able to do this. This is something that I've been dreaming of, struggling with my addictions. First, I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Amy, and I'm a recovering addict. That's part of what we do to embrace what we are struggling with is our addiction. Addiction isn't something that you can get over overnight. You know, it's something that we have to embrace in our lives. We have to continue our lives understanding what addiction is about. There are all sorts of addictions that people struggle with. There's food addictions. There's mental health issues that come with you know, certain traumas in life, and there's addictions to drugs, alcohol, you name it. You may not even believe you have an addiction, and when you have realized it, that's part of step one. Like, we take the 12 steps into our recovery as a very serious factor. Those 12 steps are really important for us to understand ourselves and to understand what the addiction is about and where it stems from.
Nice, yeah. And I hear you just had an anniversary. Was it 6 months?
Yes, 6 months.
6 months
Yeah,
clean.
and I'm 202 days today.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations. That's just
Thank you.
incredible. So I do wish my brother could be in your shoes, but it was not to be. So we want to get as many stories as we can about people that are doing well, they're recovering, they are doing their journey, and they're healing. So I'm so glad to have you here. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself, Amy? Like, looking back before your addiction, how were things better or different?
Okay, so my life has been up and down through schools, through elementary, junior high schools. I basically tried to fit in. I didn't have a lot of friends. I wasn't popular, and I didn't know popularity was really that important. But then as time went by in school, we had cliques, we had people that had more friends than others, and then it started to be more of a competition of who was better. And I honestly didn't really recognize whether or not I needed to be better than anybody else. I didn't really focus on whether or not I needed to be better than anybody else. I was focused on my education. I was focused on my classes. I was focused on, I also had some learning disabilities and things like that. That, you know, I had to learn things a little bit differently than some kids in class. You know, I had to have a trifold around me because I had issues with paying attention to my work instead of everybody else around me. And so I think that a lot of my situations were based on what everybody else thought around me. It started to develop into something where I wanted to fit in.
Just to be what they wanted to be.
Exactly.
Not who you were.
Yeah, and then I wanted to be popular because I saw how I thought these popular people were always happy and they always had friends. And, you know, eventually it became something that I suppose you could say it was an addiction that I had then, where I was addicted to attention. I wanted to have attention. And then I had certain teachers that made it clear to me that popularity wasn't important in school.
Right.
My education was what was important. And if I couldn't focus on my education, I couldn't get anywhere. And that's why they made the choices to put like a trifold around me so that I could pay attention to what I was doing in my classes instead of everybody else. And it went from there to eventually people started to be bullies. You know, they started to, you know, recognize things about me that were different. And they would point these things out, and then they would, you know, emphasize on that. And they would bring out, you know, little things that I would have, like maybe I wouldn't dress the same way as them. I wouldn't have the same friends as them, or worry about who's got what clothing, or who's who's got prettier hair. I mean, I started to get upset and started to get into a depression with that.
And it kind of led from the depression into more and more and more.
Yes, and then as I went along and as I got older, that's when people at school were dabbling in drugs, smoking weed, and doing those things. And I, honestly, at that time, I didn't necessarily focus on the drugs or what they were doing until, again, I wanted to fit in and be popular.
So you went to the other crowd that was doing the marijuana,
Exactly.
and the lighter type of
Yes,
drugs,
exactly.
which are now legal nowadays.
Yes, yes. But at that time, it was like, oh, it's so cool to be high.
Right.
It was all, everybody's smoking a joint here and there, and everybody's,
You're in with the cool crowd.
Right. And,
you
oh,
belong.
everybody's going to a party this weekend. And, eventually it got to a point where I actually decided to throw a birthday party at my house and have all these people that were doing these things, these drinking and this smoking weed, coming to my house. That party got completely trashed. I mean, I remember it. Like I had, because my birthday's around Christmas, my parents had Christmas lights around the house and things like that. And my parents didn't necessarily think that there was a need to supervise everyone. And it got overwhelming because all these people came to the house and they started trashing my mom's Christmas lights, smashing them all outside. We found beer cans in the fish tank, and then I felt just devastated that I felt like I was trying to become popular and have all these people there, and they just disrespected my family home, and they had no respect for me or my family.
But did that stop you from continuing on with the addiction, or?
No, well, at that point, I didn't realize that it was an addiction.
Okay.
I didn't realize that, I never knew much about addiction. We would have a police officer come into the school and tell us drugs were bad. That was maybe once out of the year.
Yeah.
That the officer would come in and then they would say, this is a certain kind of drug and this is say no to drugs. That was the and like that commercial, they'd show you a scrambled egg. This is your brain on drugs.
Yeah, I remember that commercial. Yeah, I remember that commercial.
And that was basically what we had in our schools to understand addiction from.
Right. We didn't have a lot of resources back then.
At that time, we didn't. To be honest with you, right now, I think that they should have something in schools where the kids could do the 12 steps, because it doesn't have to be through addiction, because those 12 steps can be used in everyday life.
Yeah.
They're very important. They
help.
teach you how to understand yourself, understand where you went wrong or how you're going wrong in your life, how to pick up from where you may go wrong, and how to put the pieces together again. I don't know how far you want me to get into the description about these things.
Well, I can ask you a couple questions. So with the drug abuse, like you started with marijuana, and then did it get into harder drugs, or?
No, I went from marijuana. I was smoking cigarettes as well.
Right. Yeah.
Then once I turned 18, I was drinking alcohol.
Okay.
I was not much of a person who drank very much because I'm a tiny figure and alcohol kicked my butt.
Right.
And I didn't like the feeling afterwards.
What would be your drug of choice when you were at this point in your life?
At that point in my life, it was marijuana.
Marijuana. Okay.
Yeah.
So you didn't get into like heroin or meth or any of that stuff?
That started happening about when I was 21.
Okay. So it was a progression then?
Yes.
From the lighter drugs into the hard, and that's similar to what my brother was like. He started with marijuana. He grew his own pot plants, would bring them home downstairs with his buddy.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a continuation from the lighter stuff, experimenting, and then moving into the harder.
In between the dabbling with the cocaine, I had pills that I tried. Ritalin, because I don't know if people know much about Ritalin, but Ritalin can affect people differently. When you have ADHD, Ritalin calms a person down. But when you don't have that, it gives you a high.
Right.
And that became really addictive for me.
Was that your drug of choice?
That's what I stepped into before I got into the cocaine. Okay. Was the Ritalin. And then when I dabbled and I tried the cocaine, I felt it gave me that effect as a Ritalin. It gave me that feeling of like I could take on anything. I could do anything. I could accomplish it too. Yeah. As long as I had the drugs. Yeah. Right? Anything was possible.
You going. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I started to struggle about the age of 21. My grandmother passed away, and I've never God rest her soul, I would never blame her, her being deceased as my excuse for using. But at that time, I felt like my things were falling apart because I was also struggling for attention with my family. I felt some jealousies towards my brother, you know, things like that. And I know my brother was never, we were never in a competition.
No, it
for
wasn't
attention.
it wasn't an intentional.
No.
Yeah.
But I've also had my first daughter born, and her father wasn't involved in her life. And then I started to fall into a depression.
Yeah.
And when I fell into that depression, I found the drugs would muffle that feeling.
Kind of get rid of it so you didn't have to feel that.
Yep. And then I felt like I could function.
Yeah.
Every time I used, I could function. Those parts of me that were hurting were numbed. I didn't feel that hurt. But then I wasn't thinking straight either.
Yeah.
Because my thought process started to change. Right. The further I fell into the addiction, my thought process wasn't functioning on doing life normally, reacting to things in life normally. It was whether or not I was going to find another high.
So what was that side like? So you were saying it dulled things, it helped you to deal with life, you didn't have to feel that depression. What's the other side?
It started that way. It started that way as I would, it would dull. But the more things that I did to obtain those drugs, to fulfill my need for the drugs, the more I would fall into depression. It was like a circle.
Yeah.
And I started prostituting myself. I started taking myself out onto the streets and giving my body up to strangers and allowing them to disrespect me and for me to disrespect myself. And I did it for money. And it took me no time to make that money, and it also took no time to use the drugs afterwards because of the depression from what I had just done.
So it was a cycle of indulge and then go out and get more money and do what you
then
had to do and indulge again.
And then also I went back into the situation where I wanted friends. So now I wasn't only supporting my habit, I was supporting other people's habits around me.
And you had the money to do it.
Exactly.
So